How different from the agreeable kind of fatigue which we used to feel after a long day's journey on horseback! Breakfast and a fresh toilet had, however, their due influence. We were in an hotel, and had hardly breakfasted when our friend, Don Dionisio Velasco, with some other gentlemen, arrived, and kindly reproaching us for preferring an inn to his house, carried us and our luggage off to his fine airy dwelling, where we now are, and where a good night's rest has made us forget all our fatigues. As we must remain here for 1 or 2 days, we shall have time to see a little more of the city, and already upon a second survey, sad and dilapidated as it now appears, I can more readily imagine what it must have been in former days, before it was visited by the scourge of civil war. The experience of two Mexican revolutions makes it more easy for us to conceive the extent to which this unfortunate city must have suffered in the struggle made by the Spaniards to preserve the castle, their last bulwark in this hemisphere. San Juan de Ulua, in spite of the miserable condition in which it now is, remains a lasting memorial of the great works which, almost immediately after their arrival on these shores, were undertaken by the Spanish conquerors. In 1682, 61 years after they had set foot on Aztec soil, they began this fortress in order to confirm their power. The centre of the space which it occupies is a small island, where the Spaniard Juan de Grijalva arrived 1 year before Cortes reached the Mexican continent. Having found the remains of two human victims there, they asked the natives why they sacrificed men to their idols, and receiving for answer that it was by orders of the kings of Acolhua, the Spaniards gave the island the name of Ulhua, by a natural corruption of that word. It is pretended that the fortress cost 4 millions, and though this immense sum is no doubt an exaggeration, the expense must have been very great, when we consider that its foundations are below the water, and that for nearly 3 centuries it has resisted all the force of the stormy waves that continually beat against it. Many improvements and additions are gradually made to the castle, and in the time of the viceroys, a first-rate engineer paid it an annual visit to ascertain its condition and to consider its best mode of defence in case of an attack. In 1806, however, Vera Cruz was sacked by the English corsair, Nicolas Agramont, incited by one Laurencio, who had been condemned to death for murder in Vera Cruz, and had escaped to Jamaica. $7 millions were carried off, besides 300 persons of both sexes, whom the pirates abandoned on the island of Sacrificios when they re-embarked. In 1771 the viceroy, then the Marquis de la Croix, remitted $1,500,000 to the governor in order that he might put the castle in a state of defence, and the strong bulwarks which still remain attest the labour that has been bestowed upon it. The outer polygon, which looks towards Vera Cruz, is 300 yards in extent; to the north it is defended by another of 200 yards, whilst a low battery situated as a rear guard in the bastion of Santiago, and on the opposite front is the battery of San Miguel. The whole fortress is composed of a stone which abounds in the neighbouring island, a species of coral, excellent for building, piedra mucara. In 1822 no stronghold of Spanish power remained but this castle, whose garrison was frequently reinforced by troops from Havana. Vera Cruz itself was then inhabited by wealthy and influential Spaniards. Santa Anna then commanded in the province under the orders of Echavarri, the captain general, and with instructions from Yturbide relative to the taking of the castle. The commandant was the Spanish general Don José Davila. It was not, however, till the following year, when Lemaur succeeded Davila in the command of the citadel, that hostilities were begun by bombarding Vera Cruz. Men, women, and children then abandoned the city. The merchants went to Alvarado, 12 leagues off, whilst those who were driven from their houses by a shower of balls sought a miserable asylum amongst the burning plains and miserable huts in the environs. Some made their way to Jalapa, 30 leagues off, others to Cordova and Orizava, equally distant. With some interruptions, hostilities lasted 2 years, during which there was nearly a constant firing from the city to the castle and from the castle to the city. The object of General Barragan, now commander in chief, was to cut off all communication between the garrison of the castle and the coasts, and to reduce them to live solely upon salt provisions, fatal in this warm and unhealthy country. In 1824 the garrison, diminished to a mere handful, was replaced by 500 men from the peninsula, and very soon these soldiers, shut up in the barren rocks, surrounded by water, and exposed to the dangers of the climate, without provisions and without assistance, were reduced to the most miserable condition. The next year Don José Coppinger succeeded Lemoire, and continued hostilities with fresh vigour. This brave general, with his valiant troops, surrounded by the sick and the dying, provisions growing scarcer every day, and those that remained corrupt and unfit to eat, yet resolved to do his duty and hold out to the last. No assistance arrived from Spain. A Mexican fleet was stationed off the island of Sacrificios and other ports, to attack any squadron that might come from thence, while the north winds blew with violence, keeping back all ships that might approach the coasts. "Gods and men," says a furious republican, Zavala, "the Spaniards had to contend with, having against them hunger, sickness, the fire and balls of the enemies, a furious sea covered with reefs, a burning atmosphere, and above all, being totally ignorant as to whether they should receive any assistance." The Minister of the Treasury, Esteva, then came from Mexico and proposed a capitulation, and the Spanish general agreed that should no assistance arrive within a certain time, he would give up the fortress, evacuating it with his whole garrison, and with the suitable honours. The Spanish succours arrived a few days before the term was expired, but the commander of the squadron, seeing the superiority in point of numbers of the Mexican fleet, judged it prudent to return to Havana to augment his forces. But it was too late. On the 15th of September, the brave General Coppinger, with the few troops that remained to him, marched out of the fortress, terminating the final struggle against the progress of revolution, but upholding to the last the character for constancy and valour which distinguished the sons of ancient Spain. Of its last assault by the French squadron in 1838 there is no need to say anything. Every newspaper, as you will remember, gave an account of the capitulation of what the French gazettes called San Juan de Ulua, the Saint Jean d'Arc of the New World, which our mariners saluted as the Queen of the Seas, Vierge sans tache, etc. 6th. We have just had a visit from General Bustamante, who with his aide de camp, a son of General Calderon, formerly governor of Jalapa, intends shortly to sail in the Jason for Havana. We have also had a visit from the commander of that vessel, Captain Puente, who succeeded our friend Captain E a, and who has been kindly endeavouring to make arrangements for taking us also, not having before been aware of our intentions of leaving Vera Cruz at this period. But although we should have much pleasure in returning by the vessel that brought us, we fear that without putting the officers to great inconvenience, it will be impossible for them to accommodate so many, for we know the carte du pays. It is therefore probable that we shall go by the English packet, which sails on the 8th, but unfortunately goes round by Tampico, not very agreeable at this season. We went to mass this morning, which was said to be particularly crowded in consequence of the general desire to catch a glimpse of the ex president. I find, personally, one important change in taste, if not in opinion. Vera Cruz cookery, which 2 years ago I thought detestable, now appears to me delicious. What excellent fish, and what incomparable frijoles! Well, this is a trifle, but after all, in trifles, as in matters of moment, how necessary for a traveller to compare his judgments at different periods, and to correct them. First impressions are of great importance, if given only as such, but, if laid down as decided opinions, how apt they are to be erroneous. It is like judging of individuals by their physiognomy and manners without having had time to study their character. We all do so more or less, but how frequently we find ourselves deceived. 7th. We went to the theatre last evening. In the boxes there were only a lady and a gentleman besides our party. The pit, however, was full, but there were no good actors.